Welcome everyone to this digital launch of the Purple Policy Paper, one of the outcomes of the Erasmus Plus project called PLUSS, about LGBTQI plus inclusion in sports. My name is Laura, and I'm happy to host this webinar where we have invited some amazing speakers, really looking forward to it, who will discuss inclusion in sport from different perspectives. The agenda for today, first, I will start with giving a short introduction of the PLUSS project to give you some context, of course. And next, I will again shortly present the key messages of the Purple Policy Paper, which is the outcome we are presenting today. But the main part of the webinar is really giving space to experts and people with experience in working on these topics in sports. Our first speaker is Claudia Krobic from the German Football Association. She is the Senior Manager, Diversity and Inclusion, and she will talk about their trans and non-binary policy, which allows players to play in their preferred category. Next, we have Bo de Leeuw, who is a non-binary athlete and who will talk about their experience in sport as an athlete and as a policy advisor for Dutch federations, such as the Dutch Swimming Federation. Our third speaker is Andrej Pišol, the president of Out in Slovenia, an LGBTQI plus sports club from Slovenia. Andrej will talk about their experience in working with federations and also local governments in Ljubljana. And lastly, we have Peter Vermaarke, who is a safeguarding officer at the gymnastic club in Belgium. Together with Amo from Out for the Win, one of the other partners within the PLUSS project, they created a code of conduct and showing how to promote inclusion in an accessible way. So we really have the different perspectives, different levels, from the level of federation, the level of a sports club, from people from the LGBTQI plus community, and also people representing the mainstream sports sector from several parts within Europe, although we do realize that most of the speakers are coming from Western Europe. So of course, this is something to keep in mind when translating the learnings from this webinar to your own situation. We will conclude our webinar with an opportunity to ask questions. So if you have any questions during the webinar, please write them down or remember them. And then at the end, we will give you the floor to ask them. All of the speakers are able to stay until the end of the webinar. So there is, of course, time to do that. But first, some more context or a few words about the PLUSS project. The project started in 2023 and will end next month. So we really are in the final phase of the project. And the goal of the project was to enhance the inclusion and participation of LGBTQI plus athletes in European grassroots sports. And the project consisted of several work packages, as it's called, including a research and also a trajectory for several LGBTQI plus sport clubs in Europe. The partners within the project were the European Gay and Lesbian Sports Federation, EGLSF. They were the coordinator of the project. Then we have the German Sport University, Keulen. They were the research partner. And then we have LGBTQI plus sport clubs coming from Denmark, Slovenia, Hungary, Belgium, Germany, and Croatia. And lastly, there's also Sportiek, which is the organization I am working for. And we were involved to write the guidelines and policy paper together with Out for the Win, the other Belgian partner. The PLUSS project had three main deliverables, which I really recommend you, of course, to have a look at. You can find them via the link that's on the slide via the website of EGLSF. There is a research report that is about the evolution and future of LGBTQI plus sports movement in Europe. This research was done by the German Sports University. And it was also translated in an illustrated story to make it also more accessible to read and to learn from. Secondly, we created guidelines for sport organizations to build inclusive and professional sport communities. It's mainly directed at LGBTQI plus sport clubs, but can definitely be of interest for the mainstream sports sectors and clubs as well. And lastly, and this is of course what the webinar today is about, it's the policy paper, which includes a set of recommendations for policymakers and sport authorities. So before I give the floor to Claudia, our first speaker, I want to say something shortly about what this purple policy paper is about. So basically, the vision of the paper is that becoming a member of an LGBTQI plus sports club should be a positive choice and not a necessity. And at present, this is still often the case. People are becoming a member because they don't feel welcome in mainstream sports. And I think, or we believe that people who are not LGBTQI plus do not always realize this is the case. And of course, it differs from country to country, but at this moment, this vision is not realized. What is needed to realize this vision is a more inclusive sports environment, so you really can feel welcome, and also stronger LGBTQI plus sports clubs. So if you want to join an LGBTQI sports clubs, they are there, they are functioning well, because at the moment they are facing challenges, more challenges than mainstream sport clubs. Again, more in some parts of Europe than in others. How can we achieve this vision? How can we achieve a more inclusive sport environment and stronger LGBTQI plus sports clubs? Through collaboration between mainstream and LGBTQI plus sports clubs. And this collaboration, and that's the main part of the main point or the main content of this policy paper, is that it's really a win-win. The mainstream sports sector can help LGBTQI plus sports clubs with access to sport facilities, which is sometimes a challenge, or sponsorships or professionalization, whilst LGBTQI plus sports clubs can bring to the mainstream sector that they are really strong in creating a community feeling, which is often a challenge in mainstream sports clubs. And they're also very strong in creating a safe space, which is a learning point for many mainstream sports clubs as well. So really, it can be a win-win to have this collaboration. Of course, this is just a summary. You can find much more in the policy paper itself. You can find it on the website, the link I showed before, and also via this QR code. I will also show this QR code at the end of the presentation again if you're too late now, because I will stop sharing my screen and give the floor to Claudia to present what they have been doing in the German Football Association.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon. I will share my screen. If I could, Laura, if you could just give me a thumbs up if you can see it.
Or we can see it, yes, thank you.
Excellent, brilliant. Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me to the digital launch event of the Purple Policy Paper. My name is Claudia Corbett, Senior Manager for Diversity and Inclusion at the DFB. And it's a pleasure to speak to you today about our inclusive policy for transsex and non-binary players. Before we go right into it, let me emphasize one thing. This policy is not a standalone measure that we came up with overnight, so to say. It is something that we've been working on for a long time, and it is part of our broader commitment to support the LGBTIQ plus community in football. So I will talk about this as well. So I'll give you a quick overview of that before I dive into the policy itself, just to show you where we're coming from. Because as part of our commitment to diversity and inclusion, we work across multiple areas for the queer community we say in Germany. I'm not sure whether that's a term that is used across Europe, but in Germany, queer community is an inclusive term. So I hope that's okay for everyone if I say that. So we work across multiple areas. We provide structures to combat discrimination. We have prevention, intervention and sanctions if any discrimination happens. We set up contact points for violence and discrimination in our regional associations. We have 21 regional associations. As you might know, German football is the largest single sports federation in the world. So we're very big, and we also set up so-called trusted persons for trans, inter, non-binary matters in the regional associations. I will come back to this later on. We also aim to create an inclusive atmosphere in our grassroots part of the game. We do that with the inclusive policy that I will talk about, and also we support and train our regional associations on that topic. Further, we work in our stadiums, because it's not just all grassroots. We also have national teams, we have cup competitions, and we work there as well to provide to create an environment where everybody can feel welcome. So we have gender sensitive entry checks and all gender toilets, and we have reporting systems and also awareness teams in the stadiums that are on top of the regular security measures that we have there. So people can just approach those people and talk to them if they have an issue, if they need some support. So that's something we do in our stadiums. And of course, we also create visibility to support the community, because we believe that communication is really key to share our commitment and to show what we're doing, and to also promote inclusion. So we take part in Pride events, and we try to use inclusive language. And we also have a queer employee network, which is quite unique at least in German sports organizations. Yeah, but today we're going to talk about this inclusive playing policy for trans, inter, and non-binary people. This is the question for today. How is this possible? Because everybody thinks, or most people think it's not possible, but we have found a solution for us that works. It's not perfect, but it works for us, and I'd like to share that with you. I'd like to speak a bit about some terms before, so that we all know what we are talking about, and also what are the challenges that we had before we came up with our policy. I brought this gender unicorn. Some of you might know it. This is to explain who we are really talking about when we say trans, inter, non-binary. To understand it, I also use it in trainings for people who I want to explain who the policy is actually for. So we're not talking about my gender expression. So we're not talking about how someone looks, what they wear, what their hair looks like, or what their physical appearance is. Also, we're not talking about emotional attraction or physical attraction, but what we're really talking about is about gender identity. This is so that it is one's internal sense of being male, female, neither of these, or both, or another gender. And everybody has a gender identity. And if somebody's sex assigned at birth and their own internal sense of gender identity is not the same, then they're trans people. So that is this part. So there's sex assigned at birth and there's gender identity. It can be the same. Like for me, then you're a cis woman, but if not, then you're a trans person. And what then is non-binary? Non-binary is a person that is neither male nor female, could be somewhere both or in between, or they might call them or identify themselves with a different gender. The problem for us in Germany, and that might differ in your country again, is that the terms gender and sex, in German, we only have one word for that, which makes it often difficult to distinguish, and they are often used interchangeable. So sometimes there's confusion what we mean, the sex assigned at birth or gender identity. And there's two other notes that I would like to give you as well about German legislation, because that's important to understand our policy as well. In Germany, we have the legal option to have the gender, the legal gender as female, male, diverse, they call it, or no gender. So we have four options. And this is since 2018. And since last year, there's also a law, which I roughly translated with Self-Identification Act. I'm not sure whether there's an official translation for that. But that says that you can simply change your name and gender by going to one of the local authorities, so to say. So there's a special authority, and where you also get married, or where you register your child after birth, you can just go there and change your name and gender. This is crucial for our policy as well. So that's based on self-declaration or self-identification. There's nothing you have to bring, no medical papers, nothing. You just go there and say, I identify as, and then they change it. And so what is a gender transition or gender reassignment? That's the time when the person begins to live according to their gender identity. So rather than the gender that they were thought to be when they were born, this is the period that they call them gender transition or gender reassignment. And what is crucial to understand is that it has different steps, which can be social, medical, and legal steps. And people might take them or might not take them, and might take them in whichever order they prefer. So if a trans person starts gender transition, they might start going to that authority and change their name and gender legally, but have not done anything about their appearance or anything medical, but they could also they can have medical treatments first or take hormones and do the name change at the end. So this is very important to understand, that this transition is highly individual. No one transition is like any other, and that also makes it so difficult to determine when it starts or when it finishes, if it ever finishes, so to say. And this is something that we had in the process, we had to understand, because obviously everybody always asks for a rule. This is the start, this is the end. Someone can play here or can play there at this certain point in time. But we had to understand that this is not really possible. It's a bit like puberty. When it starts, it's also gradual, and it can take 2 years or 4 years, and sometimes people never finish that state. So it's very, very individual, and that's something we had to keep in mind to find a solution. So what is our aim as a federation, as a national footballing body in Germany? Our top priority is offering playing opportunities to everyone in Germany. So everyone who wants to join football should get the opportunity to play. That's what our statutes say. And also, we don't want to lose anyone who plays football. So if somebody plays in a team and they come out as trans, then we don't want to reject them. So that's the frame that we had to work with, the highly individual transition. And we don't want to lose anyone, and we want to give everyone the opportunity. But then also, having said that, and keeping in mind that the transformation are highly individual, we faced several challenges that we had to deal with. That's first and all, it's the binary structure of football and many other sports. In a reality that is multi-gender, so we have male teams, we have female teams. Where do non-binary people play? I know that there are also mixed teams, for instance, I think in the Netherlands, and we have trialed some of these as well. So it's not strict, and there are rules made by humans, and you can also change them. But still, football is binary at the moment. So that's a big challenge. Then the other questions were, where do players play during the transition? As I said, when does it start, and where do they play when they are, so to say, in between? And when does it end? It's also a big question. And what happens when it ends? And then the big question that everybody has heard or thought about is, what is fair competition, about physical strength and all of that. That's of course something we have to work with that question. And who decides? Who's deciding who's playing where and when and why, and who makes that decision? Keeping in mind that we have that legislation in Germany that everybody can go to this authority and change their gender very easily. So we as sport had to take this into account, obviously. And that differs in other countries, of course. So that's where we started. And this is the policy that we adopted in 2022. Big reveal. First of all, the players choose the teams based on their gender identity. So we went with our legislation. Actually, the legislation only came into force in 2024, and we applied ours in 2022. So we were ahead of time, but we anticipated it, and that law was in the pipeline, so we knew it would come. To manage this policy, we created a new role in our regional associations, the role of the trusted person. I will come back to that and explain a bit more what they do later on. Then inter and non-binary players, they may join the men's or the women's team. They can choose, because that is what applies, what is in line with the law. Trans players, they self-determine when their transition starts or ends in consultation with the trusted person. So they go to the trusted person in their regional association, and they have a personal talk with them. So every trusted person has to have a personal conversation with the players, and then they may choose to play within the men's or women's team during the transition. So we have that transition phase covered, and they can choose. They can either stay in the team that they've played before and change later, or they can already change. So it's up to them, basically, in consultation with the trusted person, because always, well, people ask who's deciding it, and what if they just want to change the team because then they are stronger and things like that. But we said that let's find a person for each association, which ideally comes from the trans inter non-binary community themselves. It's not always the case, and they have a proper conversation with people, whether about the seriousness or I don't know how to say, but they can then make that decision. Yes, this person really identifies with that gender that they say they identify with, and then they can just choose. That's it. And once the transition is complete, they play in the team that is matching their affirmed gender. So a trans man, so someone who has had the transition to man, would then in the end have to play in a men's team. Once they say, my gender reassignment is finished, then they cannot play in the women's team anymore. Then the question about medication. We spoke to our national anti-doping agency, and they said in amateur football, they are happy to give us the go that that hormones are not, they don't count as doping if it's indicated to assist gender transition. They say the inclusion of players counts more than the competition, or the competition, which obviously was what we wanted to hear, but we were a bit surprised that it was that easy. They just said that that's fine if it's medically indicated to assist the transition. And this policy actually that applies across Germany, so across all of our regional associations in grassroots and amateur leagues, including futsal. And beyond that, it's not really our remit. because then that's something UEFA and FIFA would have a say in, and this is not being decided yet. But so our rule applies across Germany. The trusted person, you might have questions about how does that work. It's the first contact point for trans, inter, and non-binary matters. So all associations have to have a person that is also referenced on their website with contact details so that you can actually find them. They're also all listed on our website. They support the players. They have to have a personal talk with them. Consultation, I said that. They liaise with the regional association, with the players, with other clubs who might have questions, and they educate as well. So they are supposed to give trainings as well. And I also said that we recommend that that person also comes from the LGBTIQ+ community, because then it's easier to have that conversation as well. How did we get there? So as I said, it's been a long process for us. I think about 4 years in total, since the first questions came from players and from parents, coaches, associations. They all asked us, what can we do? How can we find a way to include trans players? And there was a risk of what I call patchwork approach, because it could have been that all regional associations make their own rules, which then of course might have meant that there would be exclusions. And we as the national governing body decided to start having like a focal group sessions that was 2018, where we invited players from the community, but also NGOs, so external organizations that work with the LGBTIQ+ community. And we took in their what they need and how it could all work. So that's what we did. And then we got mandated by the presidents of those 21 regional associations to develop a solution. So basically, we had something in mind already, but then we needed the mandate. So we presented the problem, so to say, in the conference of the presidents, and we proposed to come up with a solution for all regional associations, which they welcomed, because I think some of them also didn't know how to deal with the topic, and they were grateful that we, as a national governing body, would take this topic on, which then for me was a lucky circumstance, because then that helped us to also make an inclusive policy. How did we get there? Once we had the mandate, we created an expert advisory group with people from the community again, so they also came from that focal group sessions, and with the regional associations, because they were both key stakeholders, obviously. But it was important to have both of them included in developing the rule, so that they have that we have the commitment afterwards. Otherwise, it would not have worked. And then we developed this inclusive idea and went through all the committees and boards that were connected to it. So to the women's board, to the youth board, futsal, and all of that. And we pitched our idea, and we had them vote on it. And then with these votes, we went to the General Assembly in 2022. And luckily it passed, and this is where we are. But it didn't stop afterwards, obviously. We support our regional associations in finding the trusted persons. We deliver regular trainings. So we had the last training we had. We have an annual training, that holiday training at the DFB campus. The last one was in November, where we invite all the trusted people from the associations, or if they don't have anybody, then someone else from the regional association comes. So not everybody has one right now. and train them on applying the policy. We continuously communicate about the topic. So on our website, we have an FAQ. It's not up to date. I will do that. So don't hold me to account to it. I'm working on it because there's some bits and pieces missing, but we have it on our website. And obviously we get lots of emails that we reply to and all of that. We evaluate the policy. We just had an evaluation where we also look at things that are difficult, where associations feedback that we might have to rework the policy. So we're in the process of that. Having said that, it doesn't mean that we are taking it back or anything. It's working fine, but especially about the end of the transition, when is that and who decides, we are thinking about how to phrase it a bit differently in the statutes. So we're working on that. And we're working with role models. So we're inviting people from the trans, inter, non-binary community to events and let them share their experience as well, which is very helpful because many people have never met an openly trans person and they think they don't exist or they don't know who they are. And the feedback that I get that is that it's very helpful to meet people who have had this experience, and it's really an eye-opener and it helps inclusion if you meet people actually. Yeah, and I brought some numbers as well because that's always something that people are most interested in, how many people have made use of this policy. Since 2022, we've had 118 players change teams due to gender transition. And interestingly, I was surprised by that. We had roughly the same change from male to female as female to male. I found that quite interesting. So that's since introduction of the policy. And in the last season, we had 79 players that started gender reassignment, so who went to the trusted person and say, I'm in the process of, and I might still want to play in the team or I want to change. So that the figure doesn't show here, it just says begin. And we had 10 who completed. So in that season, that actually changed on their team. So I think those figures show that the policy does make a change, because before that we didn't have any trans players officially, openly playing in Germany, and now we've got more than 100, which is quite good for us. You just need to keep in mind that we have almost 8 million members, and these are 100 players. So we have very large federation, and we have 8 million members and only 100, which 100 is a very good number, but it's a small amount compared to how many players we have in total. Yeah, so that was already very long. Thanks for listening. I'm happy to take questions if you have them at the end, as Laura said. But thank you very much, and I'll pass on to the next one, or to Laura.
Thank you very much, Claudia. That was very interesting. I think many lessons to learn. Maybe one that it is a continuous process working on this topic and making a policy. And another is nothing about us without us, always including people from the community when making a policy. And I think that's something that our next speaker can also talk about. So I really want to give the floor now to Bo de Leeuw.
Thank you. Okay, let's see if I can smoothly transition to sharing my screen. Can I get a confirmation if it's working?
It was very smooth. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Good. Okay, well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much to the host of this webinar for having me and letting me talk about things that I'm very passionate about. I'm not great at time management, so either I'm done in 5 minutes or you'll have to cut me off, but I'm going to try my best. My name is Bo de Leeuw. In this picture, this was last Pride, Amsterdam Pride, during the sports boat event that was happening before the Pride started. I am an Olympic weightlifter, which unfortunately doesn't mean that I've been to the Olympic Games or that I will ever participate, but it is a style in weightlifting. And I am competing as a non-binary athlete. So that's where I get a lot of personal experience as a trans athlete in sports in the Netherlands, which is where I live and work. And these personal experiences combined with a study in sports policy and sports management led to me starting Lifting Lion in 2022, 3 years ago, where I got to combine my personal experiences as an athlete with my studies and a master thesis researching the experiences of non-cisgender athletes in Dutch sports clubs. I've been doing this work for 3 years now and working with organizations like the Dutch Olympic Committee, the John Blankenstein Foundation, and different sports federations. And my work has mainly been in the Netherlands, so all of the experiences that I have and that I've had with sports federations are mostly based on the systems that we have here in the Netherlands. So my work has many parts, and the work I think as an advocate for LGBTQ plus athletes has many parts, but I was able to define those in two main ways. The first is creating awareness and increasing knowledge. So by sharing my story and the stories of others that have different experiences in sport, like mine or unlike mine, I hope to create awareness and also increase knowledge. And then the other side of the work is advising sports organizations on policies regarding transgender and gender diverse athletes. So it's a bit of a top-down and bottom-up approach, I would say. And a big part of the work is sharing my story, and I was asked to share a bit on that. Sports can be a very complicated environment for trans athletes. Like many other minorities, sports was not preferably made for us or created for us, which means that the surroundings aren't always fitting to our needs. And this can be explained by the fact that sports was made for cisgender people. So those who identify with their gender assigned as at birth, which is the majority of our society. So that makes a lot of sense. I started weightlifting when I was 17. I was competing in the women's category, mostly stuck to amateur level, but because it's such a small sport for us in the Netherlands, the top level and grassroots level are very easily intertwined. And I ran into a few challenges when I figured out that I identify as non-binary while playing the sport that I love. As mentioned earlier, just like football, I would say weightlifting is a very binary sport. We have two categories to compete in. It's either the women's category or the men's category. So I kind of had to make a choice. And I compete in the women's category as that, for me, I'm comparable to women athletes. I'm not using hormones. As soon as I would use testosterone, that choice would be taken away from me because it would be considered using doping. But for now, I am still able to compete in the women's category. But that does mean that I'm usually stuck with the women's changing rooms, the bathrooms, being called out as one of the women's athletes whenever we do a little introduction round before we start competitions. So it's kind of a constant reminder that that I'm not really supposed to be there, but it is the only option for me in the moment. Next to that, the international policy ruled that if trans athletes don't start their transition or transition before puberty, they cannot compete in the category that matches their gender, which doesn't impact me directly because nationally we don't have a policy yet, but it does fuel the biases and misinformation that go around in the sport. I've had multiple instances where people will question whether or not I am allowed to compete in the category that I'm in, or I've had unsafe situations with fellow coaches, as I'm a coach myself, who feel free to express their opinions on the trans community in sports. So those are daily challenges that me and other trans athletes experience in weightlifting, and I know in other sports as well. And the key takeaway from my personal story is the importance of a good coach. My own coach, I had to come out to him because I had a part of my transition that was due that would take me out of competing for a little while. So I decided to come out to him as a non-binary athlete. I was very nervous because I've had a couple of unsafe situations beforehand. But luckily, or luckily as it should be, my coach fully embraced me as a non-binary athlete. But the main thing was that I was an athlete on his team. I wasn't specifically the trans athlete or the non-binary one in the group. No, I was a part of his team, but at the same time, he was making sure to ask about my pronouns, for example, or ask what I needed in competitions if in any situation I felt uncomfortable or unsafe. And I think this is a key takeaway for every athlete, because we all know, we all have that one coach that made a big impact on our lives, or if you think of a great coach, it often comes down to that personal attention that's in there, or the caring that a coach has for you as an athlete. So he is the reason that I still participated in the sport, and then I stuck through it. Without him, I don't know if I would have still competed because of some of the challenges I would face. So a few takeaways when it comes to creating awareness is, and I think we've mentioned it before, or Claudia mentioned it in a way of role models, is that being visible normalizes. I'm personally visible because I'm able to, and I can take up space safely in most situations. And in that way, I can normalize that me being a trans person in sports is something that should be normalized. So it also gives a face to the many statistics or newspaper headlines that we see. For a lot of people, I'm the first non-binary person they meet, and it gives them a chance and provides a safe space for questions, because I allow that, and I would rather answer those questions now than have them ask them to a trans person who might not be ready in the beginning to answer those questions. Creating awareness should happen on every level. So it starts with athletes, but also coaches and board members, and then sports federations. Because when we create the awareness, but also the knowledge, I was really happy to see in the previous presentation, then we went through some terminology and we talked about what that means and what the definitions are, because we need to have a base level of knowledge to facilitate having a conversation about this topic. I think it makes everyone more comfortable and more capable to have a conversation on this topic. So awareness is also a first step for sports federations and policymakers. And some federations may pursue creating a policy because they have the well-intention to create an inclusive policy. I want to see if it's possible. But a lot of the federations that I talk to as well are already facing challenges when trying to apply their sports for everyone. For example, they have cases happening already, or they have international federations coming out with policies that might not align with their vision of how their sport would look like nationally. So as I said, I mostly work with Dutch sports federations, so a lot of the experiences are based on that. But going from there, a lot of the challenges they face are, first of all, and I think we all know, we've all seen the headlines, is the political climate that is happening right now in the Netherlands, but also internationally. We all know that the Olympic Games are going to the United States in a few years. And we all see what's happening there, targeting the rights of trans individuals. And this will always impact sports, or at least that's what I'm seeing, because it is increasing biases, it is spreading misinformation, or creating a perspective on the participation of trans athletes in sport. We have IOC, who currently have put out a framework on the inclusion of trans athletes, but it is also dependent on the president and the current state of, or their current perspective on the participation of trans athletes. Next to this, we have international federations. There are quite a few federations. There's a lot of them that don't have any policies out yet, but there are quite a few already who have put out policies similar to the International Weightlifting Federation that limit the participation of trans athletes on international level. And finally, there's a lack of available knowledge, meaning not every federation is going to have a manager on inclusion and diversity, or even have someone who could be responsible for making a policy like this. So naturally, they don't have the knowledge available. So they might be getting started with the awareness, but the next step to knowledge could be a challenge as well. So how to get started as a federation? As I said, I've spoken to many federations who either would like to have an inclusive policy because it fits with their vision on what their sport should look like, or possibly they're dealing with cases or international policies that don't align with what they like to put out. So a first step would be to check what your international federation's rules are surrounding trans athletes, and be aware of when those rules apply. A lot of federations are still able to apply their own policy nationally at a national level, but will have to follow international rules when it comes to, for example, qualifications or international or European championships. A next step would be to seek guidance from, for example, IOC or your National Olympic Committee. Check if there are any guidelines available. The Dutch Olympic Federation has a guideline on gender and sex diverse athletes in grassroots sports, but also elite sports now, since recently. So it's always good to see if there's already guidelines available. Secondly, I would say find expertise. There's organizations as are present today, I feel like Out for the Win or one of our next speakers who have the knowledge on trans athletes and are able to help you as a federation or even maybe at club level to gain more knowledge on the group that we're talking about. And then lastly, it was mentioned before as well, when making a policy, it's always good to work with an expert group or advisory group containing trans athletes, but also, for example, the medical committee, if we're talking about whether or not the use of doping applies, or the athlete committee and the policymakers regarding the rules that apply to your sport as well. This also helps to create legitimacy for the end product that is your policy. You want to make sure that this policy is carried by all these stakeholders, which will help to implement it. To give you a short example of what this might look like for a federation, I'm going to use the Dutch Swimming Federation as an example of what this process might look like. So the Dutch Swimming Association or Federation has the vision to include trans athletes and apply a self-identification method as well, meaning trans people or non-binary people are free to sign up for the category that fits their preferred gender. So a first step for them is to see what is the vision, and that would be to be inclusive. A second part would be to find guidance nationally or look to the National Olympic Committee, which means for them as a Dutch federation, they will find the guideline of gender and sex diverse people. There is an English version available of this, I know. I'll make sure to add it maybe to the presentation for when it's sent later. So they find the guidance on this. And lastly, they will have to check their international federation, which means World Aquatics in their case. World Aquatics does rule that trans people can only play in the category they prefer if they have started their transition pre-puberty.
So maybe just before we start into the content and our experience, our group started somehow as an informal group in the year 2000. So this year we're celebrating 25th anniversary, and since 2010 we are as independent sports club registered on our own. We do provide sports and recreational activities for LGBTI community, including regular weekly practice, some, let's say, more occasional activities like monthly hikes, the outdoor activities, occasional some sports weekends. We both organize and also attend or organize participation at tournaments, both LGBTI as well as mainstream ones. Our second, let's say, pillar is advocacy and promotion of human rights and equality. And just as a context, we really are a small organization. We have about 50 members. As such, about 150 users that more or less regularly attend our activities throughout the year. And our workload, let's say, is shared by volunteers mainly. I will mention 4 types or 4 activities and somehow how this relates also to some more policy work or impact on communities, on local municipalities, but also maybe bigger federations. And let's go into the case examples. Within the fair football action weeks, as it started, and then football people, we from 2007 to 2021, we held against discrimination football tournaments, which were also accompanied by workshops. So it was not just a one-off event. There was a series of workshops, which then resulted in a one-day football tournament, where we acted like a local organizer and co-host of both. The main partners that we were working on within these years was a local youth club in Ljubljana, in Slovenia. Also, the city of Ljubljana, it's not mentioned on the slide, but later on we became more engaged with them as well as Slovenian FA for some of the activities, including they usually in the last years provided licensed football referees. The focus basically was the inclusion of marginalized groups, especially LGBT groups, refugees, homeless people, so all that were somehow seen as less or not usually talked about. And through the workshops and through the basically whole days of spending together, there has been an impact, especially on the young people, but also on this youth club, but also the city, as you will see slightly later on. This became really a traditional event. It's still running, it's still ongoing. Now it is run by the youth club directly. We are not directly engaged anymore, but from time to time, of course, we also visit them and are happy to see that. Within the same, let's say, framework, we also had, for about 10 years, we paid special attention to the Women League in the Slovenian football world, whereas, let's say, the men usually got all the attention and all the activities and media and publicity. We stepped in together with some selected local football clubs and the Slovenian, with the blessing, I have to say, or approval, or not being banned, maybe would be at least the starting point. We really brought the fair play moments and anti-discrimination focus also to those activities. It later got picked up by the FA, at least partially, and Professional Football Players Union that also did some activities in the later years or also in between. And then all this let's say, football focus somehow realized in 2018 where we hosted a Football People, Whole Rainbow of People roundtable in Ljubljana, which was one of the successes is that Slovenian FA also recognized that this is a viable and appropriate event to be held alongside UEFA Futsal Euro, which part of it was held in Ljubljana. And together with the city of Ljubljana, Slovenian FA, UEFA, and EJLSF, this initiative was funded by Football versus Homophobia and FAIR. And we had a high-level discussion about inclusion and LGBT community and individuals in football. I am very happy that we had also a very direct effect of this event, since the Football Federation included the terminology we heard from Claudia before, that this is important, but also from Bo, into their Football for All strategy, also to the rules of the game and so on. And now this is the part where I said before that sometimes the good practice is just practice and it doesn't necessarily means that it stays good. Currently, the Slovenian FA does not have any wording like that anymore in any of their strategic documents. And it's packed again under special circumstances or personal characteristics. One of our, also I would say this one is a good case example, is in 2014, so 11 years ago, we hosted EJLSF conference and annual general assembly in Ljubljana. And as part of the so-called Building Bridges conference, where we acted as hosts of the event, our main partners, really, we were able to use this event as a very strong lobbying tool as well, with the city of Ljubljana, so the local government, the National Olympic Committee, which is, as you know, the highest body in sport on a national level, but also Slovenian ministry. At that time, we had the Ministry of Labor, Family, Social Affairs and Equal Opportunities, supported also by FAIR and the Dutch Embassy or Embassy of the Netherlands in Slovenia. We had this event, a two-day event, where we really brought a big number of people, experts, both from politics, education, NGO, sports level. And it was really the first event of the kind to engage so many stakeholders focusing on sport, and let's say diversity, with a special focus on LGBT inclusion. I think this is my last example that is somehow a result of the cooperation that I mentioned before. So since 2014, the city of Ljubljana, which is the Slovenian capital, has an initiative, LGBT-friendly certificate. We play, let's say, some role, or I play myself, is in the advisory body that somehow oversees this certification. And what I have to stress, that the city of Ljubljana took over this initiative together with other LGBT organizations, and basically through this initiative, they do education and certification, starting with the public entities, but also education institution from kindergarten, schools, universities, but as well as private companies. And this went out of the scope of the city of Ljubljana being LGBT friendly, but also goes now beyond the capital. Ljubljana is also a member of the Rainbow Network cities. So it showed that long-term commitment, let's say, also yields results. I will not go into any of these projects, but I just want to mention the importance of the focus on the European level, especially in countries where you might not either think or the reality is not very accepting for LGBT community, where all of these projects give some, first of all, opportunity, focus, but as well as political pressure to the different stakeholders. And my, let's say, lessons learned. Really, cooperation and collaboration with the wide network of partners is good, especially if these partners are relevant. So you need to really identify who your target would be and to work with them. We heard also in the beginning when Laura was introducing the project and the policy that there are LGBTIQ plus sports club, but also this has an effect in the mainstream organization and sports clubs. And this is true. We can vouch for that through our actions and activities, some other, maybe not on the top level, but other organizations learn through also our examples. This is, I guess, also logical that one-off activities are not as effective, and maybe our, let's say, this high-level roundtable debate that I mentioned was a good example of this. So it had some effect, but since we are not really actively working together with the Slovenian FA, the results are not there, unfortunately, anymore. And as I already mentioned in the previous slide, at least for us, it works to use the pressure and momentum of EU and other internationally funded projects to get some additional, let's say, interest. I'm within 15 minutes that I was allocated, so thank you for your attention. We do have some resources on our website, but we have revived it, so we need to update it as well. I will be ready for some questions after our next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre, also to keep it within time. I will just directly give the floor to our last speaker to really allow time for questions at the end. So Peter, the floor is yours. Peter, we cannot hear you yet. You're still muted. And I think you also need to switch the slides because now we see your, how do you call it? Presentation notes. And you're still muted.
Mute.
Yes.
Right.
We can hear you now.
You can hear me now, and let's see whether I can work with Zoom, as it is very difficult for me. Share, right, and where do you have it? Here. Tell me if you see the presentation.
You can see the presentation. It's still on the PowerPoint, but it's okay. We can read what we need to read. So
No, let's do it this way. Right.
It's perfect.
Allow me to talk about, so first of all, thank you very much for having me on this very interesting and very new seminar for me too. Allow me to talk to you about a very local initiative of inclusion. It's an initiative that was very low threshold and very accessible for everybody. So the initiative was called Rose. But first of all, let's talk about me. I am Peter van Markeren. I'm married to Marijke van Dalen. I have 3 kids, and I am actually working in the sales and marketing department. I'm not involved at all in anything about LGBTQ. It's not that I'm not interested, but it is just not something in my scope. I am a coach. I was a coach for more than 30 years in the local gym club OTV Nazareth. And it was during my career as a coach, I was always approached by the members of the board to become the safeguarding officer of the club. But first, how it all started. The safeguarding officer, the thing was that in 2016, the world was confronted by the misconduct of Larry Nassar, who was the team doctor of the United States women's national gymnastics team from 1996 to 2014. Here you can see almost all gymnasts that were abused by him. This eventually led to his conviction for life, but this misconduct had a very big impact globally, and in various countries signs of misconduct surfaced. And also it was in Belgium that there were signs of misconduct in the national gymnastics team in Flanders. It was picked up by the Gymnastic Federation of Flanders. They took it on board, and they undertook several steps to avoid this further misconduct in the gymnastics world. One of those steps was the introduction of the API, or Aanspreekpunt Integriteit, which we can translate as a safeguarding officer. So one of the things that came into law is that every club that was associated with the Gym Federation of Flanders, they had to have a safeguarding officer. In 2019, I was appointed as the safeguarding officer for the OTV, or Olympic Gymnastics Organization of Nazareth. One of the first things I did was I asked to have a second partner as a safeguarding officer. As I am male, I wanted a female person in as an API, because in case of a victim and they want to tell something, they have to have the choice whether they want to talk to a trusted person, whether it's a male or a female. As an API, what do? We have to report. First of all, we have to register the complaint. We have to investigate it. We have to mediate, and we have to report it. And in case there are very serious accusations, sexual abuse or whatever, then we have to report it to the police as well as to the Federation safeguarding officer. As a safeguard, you are the contact in case of, for example, discrimination, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's age or whatever, or abuse, whether it is verbally, physically, or sexually. But the main purpose, and that was also my main intention, is we have to avoid that these things happen. So my main goal is that we educate everybody, and we inform everybody, and we communicate it. And definitely to people who are new to the organization, that we also give them a clear indication of our values, of our fundamentals. Into 2023, Amy approached me and asked me whether we could develop a charter where we are defining in a very low and a very accessible way inclusion in the club. So we developed a charter called ROOS, ROOS. And this was a charter with very clear fundamentals, which were applicable to everybody involved in the club, whether it is a gymnast or a coach or a volunteer, board member, and even judges. So it's very top down. The baseline of the charter is welcome to everybody and sportsmanship in a roos. Now, roos is a Dutch word and means actually is in English it's called bullseye. So we wanted to be to have a charter saying that everybody is welcome, and it creates a win-win situation for everybody who is active in sports. What are now the key fundamentals of RWS? First, the R stands for respect. We have to be respectful and inclusive to everybody. And this means whether it is in between gymnasts, whether it is between gymnasts or coaches, coaches between coaches, and so on and so on. We have to also be very respectful to material, which is a bit odd, but I will explain it. Make sure that if you have the right use of the material in gymnastics worlds, you are also creating a safe environment where your fellow gymnasts can participate. So again, it's also respect via the material to the person. We care a lot for each other. So if we see that there is a something happening, we talk, we listen, and we try to find a solution. And most of all, respectful communication is the best way of working and not excluding somebody. Always open communication. So the open communication between the gymnast and the coach, and also at a level that it is understandable. For example, the communication must be adapted to every level, whether the gymnast is 5 years or 10 years or 15 or 20 years. It needs to be clear. You have to compliment your gymnast as well. Be positive, give them a pat on the back. If you give feedback then to the customer, to your gymnast, make sure it is in a positive way. For example, if somebody does an exercise, most of the time you hear the feedback not bad, which is actually negative. You can say it in a more positive way. Says, you've done it well. Next time, pay attention to this and that, and then you can have a very, very good execution, which is a much better positive approach. And you support every gymnast, whether it's the best one or the one that has difficulties in specific exercises. You support them, and it is a learning curve. At every level, again, it's your communication. You make sure that your communication is adapted to the age of the gymnast. Also differentiate in your type of exercises. Some gymnasts are really good in an exercise, others are struggling. Pay attention to both and make sure that if you want to come to a result, make sure that you differentiate your exercises. And if you explain it to your gymnast, make it sure that they can understand it. The last one, S, stands for working together, or collaborate and support. It needs to be an everybody wins approach. So it's inclusion, not exclusion. So if you start with 10 gymnasts at the beginning of the season, you end up as well with 10 gymnasts at the end of the season. How can you get an inclusion? We do everything together. If we do exercise, we do it together. But even if we have a break, we sit together. We don't play on our mobiles. We make sure that they talk to each other and that there is a communication. Also support or how should I say, stimulate gymnasts support and help each other. This is very important. It gives a feeling as a one team, and also show them responsibility. If somebody is breaching the fundamentals or the values of the club, speak out and say that it is not allowed. So ROOS could be translated into Dutch as core fundamentals, as C for collaboration and support, O for open communication, R for respect, and E for every level. This is a charter that is for everybody who comes in contact with the club, whether it's a gymnast or it's gymnasts, parents or family, coaches, board members, externals, and volunteers. So everybody has to read the Rose Charter to make sure that they are aware of our values as a club. We also communicate this on our website, but we also display it into the gymnastic hall where we train. We communicate it to every gymnast at the start of the season. And if necessary, we repeat it later in the season as well, just to make them aware of the principles. One of the nice things that we had on the Rose or core fundamentals is that this charter was picked up by the local authority, the NASA Tepente, and they awarded in 2024 the club for these fundamentals. And in the next step, it was that from 2026 on, the local government will reward all clubs or organizations who are have some kind of a charter of inclusion within their organization. They will be rewarded by money or whatever, or so that inclusion is an important issue, an important something for the new organizations. That's it. So this is the very local initiative on inclusion we had here in Belgium.
Thank you very much, Peter, to also show how at a local level as a small club, you can also make and work on inclusion within your club. Before we give the floor to all of you to ask questions, I just have one final slide that I just want to share because I think it's important. It's just a quote: "No matter where your organization is starting from, every step towards inclusion counts." It's, I think, something that we need to keep in mind. It's often not possible to be perfect from the beginning, but just start with one step and then the next, and then in the end, you get an inclusive sports organization. So I'll stop sharing my screen again so we can see each other. I think maybe Michele also wants to make a picture, and then I give the floor to all of you for questions. Just raise your hands and then we can give you the floor.
Thank you. Just a quick note, if you can switch on your camera so we can take a screenshot of the beautiful audience that we had this afternoon. Meanwhile, you will find the link of a very short survey of just 12 minutes that for us is very important to collect feedback on this survey. So please complete the survey. And I take this opportunity also to thank on behalf of EGLSF, the European Gay and Lesbian Sport Federation, all the participants be here this afternoon, and of course Sportic and Laura May for hosting this webinar, and all the speakers for these amazing speeches. Thank you very much. And Luca, let us know when we are ready with the picture. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm ready. So please smile. Smile again. Perfect, thank you.
So if there are any questions, please raise your hand. You can do it via React, I think, and then you can raise your hand at the bottom of your screen. And in case there are not any questions, maybe I'm just looking at the speakers if they have a final thought they would like to share. And if not, then we can just also wrap it up and go home with many food for thought. That's of course also a possibility. So I would say final chance to ask a question. And then otherwise you can just leave the meeting, and we thank, of course, all the speakers and also everyone who was following in the audience for their interesting speeches and questions in the chat, or feedback in the chat at least.
Okay.
Probably many people are still very inspired and still thinking about the lots of food for thought, and so maybe there's no questions. So like I would just really like to thank you all for this event. And yeah, I just wrote a few minutes ago a comment on the chat because it's been very very informative, and it connects back to many other experiences and projects. So it's a sign that we're on the good path, right path.
Thank you for your feedback. Okay, on this note, I think we can wrap it up. And thanks a lot for your attention, and the speakers for your contribution.
Thank you. Bye.